long before the birth of modern civilization, before the rise of sprawling metropolises and intricate networks of roads, there existed a land known as Mesopotamia. Its very name means land between rivers, derived from the Greek words mesos for middle and potamos for river. Nestled between two mighty watercourses, the Tigris and the Euphrates, this ancient landscape became the cradle of human advancement, giving rise to some of the earliest cities and the foundations of organized society. But why did Mesopotamia matter so much? The answer lies in its geography, a unique convergence of water, soil, and climate that made it the stage for history's first great convergence of people, ideas, and innovation. The very shape of the land defined the region's destiny. Mesopotamia stretches across what is now largely modern-day Iraq, with its edges touching parts of Syria, Turkey, and Iran. The Tigris and Euphrates Rivers, both originating from mountains in eastern Turkey, roll in parallel arcs before joining and flowing into the Persian Gulf. It wasn't merely their existence that shaped Mesopotamian history, but their unpredictable moods and abundant offerings. These rivers regularly overflowed their banks, spilling nutrient-rich silt across the plain and creating a patchwork of fertile land known as the floodplain. But the floods were not gentle or predictable like the ones in ancient Egypt. Instead, they could be erratic and destructive, forcing the inhabitants to become masterful engineers and savvy survivors. The first and most profound impact of Mesopotamia's geography was on agriculture. Before organized farming, humans lived as hunter-gatherers, moving with the seasons and the migrations of animals. But in Mesopotamia, the richness of the alluvial soil left behind by the rivers made it possible to plant and harvest crops with unprecedented reliability. Wheat, barley, legumes, and other plants flourished in these conditions. The surplus grain could be stored, freeing people from the uncertainties of wild food sources and allowing them to settle in permanent villages. Year after year, agriculture transformed. What was once a reliance on nature became an act of manipulation as early Mesopotamians dug canals, built dikes, and learned to direct water where it was most needed. This mastery over water was nothing short of revolutionary. It enabled the growth of larger communities and the creation of surplus, laying the groundwork for trade, specialization, and eventually civilization as we know it. The rivers, though, provided more than sustenance for crops. They became the lifeblood of communication and exchange. Navigable waters linked distant settlements, enabling the flow of not just goods, but also ideas. Trade networks emerged, reaching from the Persian Gulf deep into the interior of Anatolia and the Levant. Mesopotamian merchants traveled widely, exchanging surplus grain, textiles, and pottery for timber, precious metals, and stone. The lack of natural resources like wood and minerals in the region made this trade essential. In turn, this networking fostered cultural cross-pollination, introducing new technologies, religions, and customs. But the rivers also created boundaries and tensions. The two great streams carved their own courses, framing distinct regions: Sumer in the south, Akkad further north, and Assyria beyond that. Each of these zones developed its own identity, languages, and political structures. City-states like Ur, Uruk, and Babylon rose to prominence. Their power measured not just in wealth, but in their ability to control water. For in Mesopotamia, he who controlled the rivers commanded the fate of the land and its people. The physical challenges of Mesopotamia shaped its social and political institutions. Without the natural protection of mountains or deserts that favored centralized kingdoms elsewhere, Mesopotamian cities were vulnerable to outsiders and to one another. This fostered a climate of both competition and cooperation. City walls rose in stone and mud brick, standing as bulwarks against both human enemies and the caprices of nature. The need for collective labor to build and maintain irrigation networks led to new forms of government, bureaucracy, and law. Priests, kings, and officials emerged, not just as symbols of authority, but as practical managers of resources and people. In this way, the geography of Mesopotamia cultivated the seeds of government and codified law. The earliest known legal code, the Code of Ur-Nammu, and later the Code of Hammurabi, arose here, providing structure and justice to increasingly complex communities. These laws touched on everything from property and trade to crime and punishment, laying the early foundation for the rule of law that governs societies to this day. Population growth fueled further change. As villages swelled into towns and then into cities, the demands on the land and water intensified. This led to both remarkable achievements and bitter conflicts. Canals grew broader and longer, temples and ziggurats rose from the plain, and writing systems emerged as scribes tallied grain, memoranda, and prayers. Cuneiform, the world's oldest known script, was carved with a reed stylus on clay tablets, enabling everything from accounting to epic poetry. But this very dependence on water laid bare the fragility at the heart of Mesopotamian society. The rivers, so vital to survival, could just as easily bring devastation. In years of drought, fields withered, and famine stalked the land. When the waters came too violently, homes and stores were swept away. These trials were interpreted as signs of divine pleasure or wrath, giving rise to a rich mythology of capricious gods and goddesses whose tempers had to be placated with offerings and ritual. The relationship between people and nature became a defining feature of Mesopotamian religion and culture. Another geographical factor contributing to the region's significance was its position as a crossroad. Mesopotamia lay at the intersection of major land routes connecting the east and west, north and south. This made it not just a fertile homeland, but a meeting ground for travelers, conquerors, and ideas. Empires rose and fell here, each leaving a mark on the land and its people. The Sumerians, Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians all claimed this soil, their achievements echoing down through the ages. Why did this matter? Because the innovations that arose from this place, the city, the wheel, the plow, systems of writing, law, and administration, were born of necessity, fostered by a landscape that forced its inhabitants to cooperate, adapt, and invent. These innovations did not stay confined to the banks of the Tigris and Euphrates. Through trade, conquest, and migration, they spread outward, influencing the development of societies across the ancient world and beyond. Over centuries, the fortunes of Mesopotamia waxed and waned. The rivers shifted their courses, sometimes rendering old cities unlivable or destroying careful arrangements of farmland. Waves of conquerors swept in, from the Persians to the Greeks, each adapting the legacy of the land to their own ends. Even today, remnants of this civilization endure in the archaeological ruins scattered across the region, silent testimonies to the enduring power of geography. To understand why Mesopotamia mattered is to grasp the intimate dance between people and place. The land between the rivers was never easy. Its gifts came with constant demands for vigilance, cooperation, and resilience. Out of that struggle came the seeds of so much that marks human society today: writing, accountability, collective governance, urban life, trade, and religion. From humble irrigation ditches to grand temples and thriving markets, Mesopotamia offers us the story of what happens when geography places people at the heart of opportunity and challenge, and they rise to meet it. In every age, humanity's fortunes have been shaped by the land it inhabits. Nowhere is this more apparent than in ancient Mesopotamia, where rivers bred prosperity and peril, where ingenuity turned wilderness into civilization, and where the achievements of the past continue to flow through the currents of time. The story of Mesopotamia is the story of adaptation, of harnessing the gifts and taming the dangers of an unpredictable world. Its geography mattered not just for what it gave, but for how it demanded people to think, cooperate, and dream. The legacy of that land, formed between the twin rivers, nurtures the roots of our shared human journey.